You think the medieval castle was a symbol of warmth and safety? Think again. Forget every fairy tale you've ever heard. These magnificent fortresses were giant stone monsters engineered to freeze you to death. It was so cold that the air inside was often colder than the air outside. You weren't just isolated from your enemies, you were trapped in a colossal stone refrigerator. Today, we're diving deep into the biggest thermodynamic disaster of medieval architecture. Why those thick, 5-meter stone walls, which shielded the Lord from every siege, became massive heat-sucking sponges, turning every chamber into a glacier core. We'll explore the catastrophic details, from the suicidal chimney effect of the Great Hall and the tiny fissures that created constant cold air channels, to the desperate fight against smoke-filled hearths and the nightmare of the fuel bill. Let's find out exactly how medieval residents battled every single night just to avoid hypothermia in their own stronghold. Let's get started. Forget the fairy tale. You're inside a stone monster. A blizzard howls outside. Inside, your breath fogs white. Cold slithers through thick walls, bites your lungs, and clings to skin. These marvels of power became winter refrigerators, proof that defense beat comfort. We're unpacking how features that repelled armies nearly froze their owners, starting with the very substance castles were built from. This monumental contradiction structures, built for ultimate survival, simultaneously guaranteeing seasonal misery, is the central truth of medieval castle life. The sheer scale and ambition of these fortresses failed at the most basic human need: warmth. Every arch, buttress, and crenellation represented a military advantage, but introduced a thermal vulnerability. The inhabitants didn't just endure the cold, they waged a daily, exhausting war against it, where defeat meant sickness or death. The stone, intended to be their ultimate shield, turned into the ultimate conductor of despair. The material that saved lives in war quietly betrayed them in winter stone. Thick stone walls shrug off rams, but act like a thermal sponge. In deep frost, masonry becomes an ice battery, constantly draining hearth, heat, and bleeding chill back into the living space for hours. Warmth doesn't linger. It's absorbed and returned as misery, turning rooms into glacier cores. When the castle builders stacked these massive, dense rocks, they were unknowingly creating the perfect cold reservoir. The process is simple physics. The stone's high thermal mass means it takes tremendous energy to warm up, and once cold, it takes just as long to relinquish that chill. Imagine trying to heat a deep freezer by lighting a candle inside it. The stone actively leached the vital, expensive heat from the air, ensuring that even moments after the fire peaked, the ambient temperature near the walls remained punishingly low. This wasn't just cold. It was a profound, systemic lack of heat energy. That stored cold made the castle's grandest space a heating catastrophe. The Great Hall was thermodynamic self-sabotage, a testament to display over physics. Lofty roofs created a harsh chimney effect. Hard-won heat raced upward, escaped through joints in the massive timber roof structure, and left the floor-level living space frigid. Smoke vents, louvres, that saved lungs from carbon monoxide invited constant icy drafts sweeping across the flagstones, robbing the air of any chance to settle and warm. The air exchange rate in these vast halls was astronomical. You could burn a wagon of wood, endure the smoke, and still shiver at the table during a grand feast. Lords and ladies, positioned strategically near the hearth for courtly display, were often merely surviving, draped in furs while their breath steamed. The hall, the castle's beating heart for ceremony and justice, became its coldest, most exposed limb in winter. Look down because the floor joined the ambush too. Packed earth or flagstone floors let cold climb from below with relentless efficiency. They were directly coupled to the freezing ground, acting as giant cold plates. Thin leather soles failed instantly to protect against this pervasive chill. A thick layer of scattered straw or reeds helped little, masking the cold rather than insulating against it. On wind-scoured heights, the castle's strategic advantage became a winter curse. The fierce gusts slipped through the narrow arrow slits, designed to give archers a firing angle, and through the ill-fitted cracks of heavy wooden doors. These currents of frigid air constantly hissed through the space, stripping away any pocket of warmth created near a hearth. Every defensive feature that worked in war, the height, the slits, the stone, robbed comfort in winter. Worse, medieval construction couldn't seal the leaks even on calm days. Medieval construction methods ensured the walls were chronically leaky. Aging lime mortar, the binder of the castle's strength, split into countless microfissures over decades, turning the colossal stone walls into porous sieves. These small channels constantly wicked cold air into the chambers. Warped wooden shutters, never perfectly planed or fitted, left knife-thin gaps, allowing drafts to penetrate with surgical precision. Oiled cloth or parchment, used in place of expensive glass, admitted only gray light and no heat. Winters meant permanent twilight, dim, draughty, and stubbornly cold. The sheer lack of light demanded constant use of candles and torches, which, while offering fleeting warmth, burned costly fuel. The psychological toll of living in constant semi-darkness, punctuated by the relentless wind, must have been immense. If weather can't be kept out, the only option is to try and make more heat. Enter the hearth hero of paintings, villain in physics. An open central hearth glowed bravely, yet was a disaster for heating efficiency. Most warmth, obeying physics, fled instantly upward. Even with a louve in the roof, smoke management was imperfect. Soot-filmed beams, tapestries, furniture, and lungs, leaving a pervasive, acrid smell. The constant smoke stained the inhabitants and their possessions, creating an environment of perpetual grime. Later innovations brought the wall fireplace with an external flue, a vast improvement in air quality, but a poor solution for widespread heating. The wall fireplace heated only its immediate vicinity. Its radiant heat died a few paces away, meaning anyone not directly in front of it was still cold. Fire was spectacle and necessity, but efficiency wasn't invited. It was a fuel-hungry, localized defense against a castle-wide problem, and inefficiency came with a brutal fuel bill. Castles swallowed mountains of wood. Fuel acquisition was arguably the most critical logistical challenge, consuming the lives of countless laborers. Cutting, hauling, drying, and meticulous stacking of logs became a non-stop, year-round operation. Entire forests were managed with the sole purpose of feeding the castle's insatiable appetite. A siege or heavy snow that cut supply routes meant rapid crisis, as the warmth generated by a single day's burn was quickly lost to the cold stone. Some regions, lacking dense forests, turned to alternatives. Peat provided steady heat, but produced dense, heavy smoke. Coal burned hotter and longer, but was costlier, harder to obtain, and dangerous to mine. The cost soared as air quality sank, making the simple act of staying warm an enormous economic and labor drain. The sheer volume of fuel determined the difference between discomfort and death. With little ambient warmth, daily life retreated to tiny hot zones. Since heating the entire colossal structure was impossible, daily life had to contract. In winter, people clustered tightly by the few burning hearths, and privacy evaporated. Far-flung bedchambers were as cold as corridors, often rendered fit only for the act of sleep itself. The inhabitants realized they must heat bodies and microclimates, not rooms. This led to the revolutionary use of tapestries and thick wool curtains, which were hung on the stone walls to build a still air barrier. These dense hangings created an essential insulating layer, actively blunting the stone's cold draw and effectively carving rooms within rooms, where human activity could safely take place. The most critical application of this textile technology was around the bed. Fabric solved drafts, and wealth began to signal warmth. More fabric meant more status and, critically, more comfort. Tapestries and heavy curtains were hung strategically to mask leaky joints and divide vast halls, instantly creating snug, usable corners. The presence of expensive textiles was a direct, visible sign that the lord was wealthy enough to afford insulation. Furs and pelts, fox, bear, sable were the ultimate luxury technology. They lined cloaks, topped beds as thick coverlets, and tamed the icy stone floors. Insulation and prestige combined into one highly portable defense system. They were assets, treasured and moved with the household. However, in harsher climates of Central and Eastern Europe, where textiles alone weren't enough, a bigger leap appeared: the enclosed masonry tile stove. Move the fire inside a thermal mass, and the room finally changes. The tile stove was a revelation. It burned fire within a sealed chamber, Its thick masonry or ceramic shells soaked up heat and radiated it steadily for hours, even after the flames died, while smoke left safely through a flue. Retrofitting these systems into old stone fortresses, which lacked the complex chimney infrastructure, was hard and expensive, but where tile stoves spread, winters softened dramatically. They provided long-lasting, even, and smokeless heat. Meanwhile, people relied on countless smaller hacks for immediate survival. Heated stones wrapped in cloth went into beds to banish the first shock of cold sheets. Huddling in groups created a human microclimate, saving logs, and hot stews or spiced wine warmed the core and boosted fragile morale, proving that often the simplest solutions were the most effective. Beyond rooms and stoves, the next shield was worn, not built. Clothing was the most intimate and adaptable survival system. The strategy was sophisticated layering. Start with linen close to the skin to wick away inevitable sweat and moisture, which causes chilling. Add wool, often in multiple tunics or layers, to trap insulating air. Finish with heavy, water-resistant, fur-lined cloaks or gowns. Hats and mittens stayed on indoors. Every piece of fabric was precious. Dark fabrics were favored not just because they hid the dirt and soot, but because they absorbed what little sunlight bled through the tiny windows. The battle against the frigid stone floors was so constant that some inhabitants, especially nobles, wore fur-lined stockings under their shoes, treating their feet like the most critical piece of equipment. Function dictated every detail of winter fashion. Layers fought by day. By night, the bed became a fortress. The bed was the ultimate thermal citadel, designed specifically as a survival tool against the night. It began with a sturdy wooden frame. Wood resists cold better than conductive metal, holding a straw or feather tick mattress for initial insulation. This was topped by multiple stacked wool blankets, a heavy fur covering, and the indispensable bed curtains often hung on a frame or tester, which formed a warm, private, airtight tent, trapping body heat. Before crawling in, servants often prepared the bed by placing hot water bottles, ceramic or metal, or pans of glowing embers wrapped in cloth to pre-warm the icy sheets. Families, spouses, children, and often close kin or favored servants frequently slept together for shared heat and security as the wind moaned and rattled through the gaps in the massive stone walls. Transition. Yet cozy nests couldn't erase the castle's fiercest math fuel. The logistical pressure never relented. Stewards guarded fuel inventories like treasure, constantly counting stacks and projecting days, praying for a thaw before the pile vanished. This was the administrative backbone of winter survival. Forest-poor regions leaned heavily on peat or coal, despite the cost and difficulty. Riverside sites scavenged driftwood, while in times of extreme scarcity or siege, desperate inhabitants resorted to burning anything dry, even dry dung. A small planning error, a miscalculation in the burn rate, or a delay in supply could chill an entire household, making the steward's winter duty as critical as the nights on the battlements. The fate of the castle rested as much on the size of the woodpile as the height of the walls. Pressure like this slowly reshaped the buildings themselves. Across centuries, builders acknowledged the problem and made warmth easier. They designed smaller rooms, lowered ceilings to minimize heat loss, and incorporated tighter shutters. Doors were insulated, draped with felt or leather, and protected by inner curtain lobbies to create a necessary airlock against drafts. The development of permanent ducted heating systems marked a turning point. Furnace rooms appeared, with flues running through the walls to distribute warmth. Hollow walls and double floors created insulating air gaps. In Central Europe, the beautiful tiled stoves became not just art, but infrastructure. Later, in the Renaissance, larger, more open fireplaces gained better chimneys, finally allowing a taste for comfort to influence the fortress's design. Even so, survival never relied on one fix, it needed a toolkit. No single solution ever truly conquered the medieval cold. People stacked strategies. Survival required a complete toolkit of relentless adaptation. This meant heavy textiles on walls to stop thermal bleeding, curtains around beds to trap human heat, multiple layers of clothing, human clustering for communal warmth, meticulously planned fuel management, and, where geography and wealth allowed the deployment of revolutionary tile stoves. These varied methods reveal the deep, resourceful struggle required just to exist. Choose your winter, a grand hall where your breath fogs like a ghost, or a snug corner that holds its heat till dawn, realizing that even the grandest seat of power was perpetually fighting the laws of thermodynamics. Either way, warmth in a castle was never granted, it was earned.